When my HOA flooded my land with raw sewage and laughed in my face, I spent 2 weeks planning the perfect revenge. They never saw it coming. What would you have done? I never thought my biggest battle would be against my own neighborhood. My name is Elon Reynolds, and for the past 3 years, I've built a quiet, honest life here in Maple Grove Estates. My workshop, where I craft custom furniture, sits behind my home, surrounded by the lush garden I poured my heart into, tomatoes that won first prize at the county fair, peppers so vibrant they looked fake, and sunflowers that stretched toward the sky. This land, this home, was my dream. But dreams can turn into nightmares overnight. On Tuesday morning, I stepped outside, coffee in hand, expecting to breathe in the crisp morning air. Instead, the stench hit me like a brick wall. My stomach turned as I saw it, a bubbling, brown swamp spreading across my yard. I froze, staring at the filthy river of sewage creeping toward my workshop, drowning my tools, my garden, and my hard work. I scrambled down the steps, slipping in the muck. This wasn't a small leak. This was a disaster. And deep down, I already knew who was responsible. The HOA. But I had no idea just how far they were willing to go, or what I'd have to do to stop them. I gritted my teeth as I dialed the Maple Grove Estates HOA emergency line, my hand tightening around my phone with each deafening ring. After 20 minutes on hold, a cold, familiar voice answered, Karen HOA president and professional thorn in my side. Mr. Reynolds, I'm very busy today. What seems to be the problem, she said, irritation dripping from every syllable. I took a deep breath, trying to control the fury bubbling inside me. There's raw sewage flooding my yard, Karen. My entire garden is ruined, my workshop is underwater, and the smell is unbearable. You need to send someone. Now. She sighed, as if I'd just asked her to move mountains. Oh, that. Yes, we authorized some changes to the neighborhood plumbing yesterday. It's probably just a temporary side effect. I nearly dropped the phone. A side effect? Karen, my yard looks like a toxic waste dump. This is a health hazard. Don't be so dramatic, she said, her voice sugary sweet, the way someone speaks to a child throwing a tantrum. We'll have someone take a look next week when our maintenance team is available. Next week? My voice rose with disbelief. I can't live with this for a week. Then she said the words that lit a fire inside me, words so casually cruel they were almost laughable. Well, Mr. Reynolds, perhaps you should have thought about potential drainage issues before buying in Maple Grove at all. That was it. The real truth behind her indifference. I wasn't one of them, the HOA's inner circle of McMansion-dwelling, power-tripping suburban royalty. They had never wanted me here. Now, they weren't just ignoring my problem, they were using it to push me out. I hung up without another word, my hands shaking with rage. If they thought I'd roll over and let them destroy everything I'd built, they had another thing coming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, running on 2 hours of sleep and sheer rage, I decided to investigate myself. If the HOA thought I'd sit quietly and accept their sewage swamp as my new backyard feature, they had seriously miscalculated. I threw on my boots, grabbed my phone for evidence, and followed the trail of destruction. The once lush green grass was brown and slick with filth, my tomato plants, award-winning, mind you, were drowning in wastewater, and my workshop. It smelled like something had crawled in and died, twice. But where was it all coming from? I followed the putrid flow up the slight hill toward the HOA-owned common area. Then, half hidden behind some bushes, I saw it, a new, unmarked PVC pipe protruding from the ground, actively spewing raw sewage. I took dozens of photos and videos, zooming in on the freshly dug soil around it. This wasn't old infrastructure failing, this was installed recently. Someone had rerouted waste directly onto my land. As I stood there, rage pulsing through me, a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Oh dear, that doesn't look good. I turned to see Howard Wilkins, HOA treasurer, and Karen's personal yes-man, standing a safe distance away, holding his tiny, pampered poodle as if it might catch poverty just from breathing the same air as me. "Howard," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Care to explain why HOA property is dumping raw sewage onto my yard?" His expression barely flickered. "I'm not aware of any installation. Must be a county issue. Have you called them?" Lying to my face. "Karen told me the HOA authorized plumbing changes," I said, narrowing my eyes. Howard chuckled, a lazy, smug laugh. "I'm afraid she must have misspoken. Now, if you'll excuse me, Precious needs her morning walk." He turned and practically fled, leaving me fuming, fists clenched at my sides. They were covering something up. I took one last look at the filthy, bubbling pipe and then at my once beautiful property. If the HOA thought they could get away with this, they were dead wrong. That evening, I attended the HOA meeting armed with evidence and boiling with rage, but I knew I had to play it smart. If I stormed in shouting, they'd brush me off as a troublemaker. No, I needed them to dig their own grave, and I was bringing the shovel. The community center was packed, neighbors seated in neat rows, their faces a mix of boredom and blind trust in the HOA. I spotted Karen Thompson at the front, her trademark smug smile in place as she flipped through her agenda. Howard sat beside her, avoiding my eyes. I signed up to speak, but Karen conveniently pushed me to the bottom of the list. For 2 agonizing hours, I sat there listening to arguments about fence heights and mailbox colors, all while my yard drowned in sewage. She was stalling me on purpose. Finally, my name was called. I strode to the front, pulled out my tablet and connected it to the projector. The first image appeared on the giant screen, raw sewage bubbling up in my backyard. The room shifted, a few people murmuring in disgust. I clicked to the next image, the mysterious PVC pipe spewing waste. Another slide, Howard standing near it, looking unbothered. "This was installed by the HOA last week," I began, my voice even but laced with tension. "It is actively dumping raw sewage onto my property. My land is ruined. My home stinks. My workshop is destroyed. And the HOA is pretending they have no idea why." Gasps. Murmurs. A few people turned to look at Karen, whose smug expression had faltered ever so slightly. "That can't be right," she cut in, her voice forced casual. "The HOA hasn't authorized any such installation." I didn't blink. "Then why did you personally tell me 2 days ago that the HOA made plumbing changes?" The room fell dead silent. Karen's eyes narrowed. "I said no such thing." I smiled coldly. "Funny. Because I recorded the conversation." She paled. I hadn't recorded a thing. But I was betting that her reaction alone would tell everyone in this room who was lying, and who was about to burn. After the HOA meeting, I knew I had struck a nerve. Karen's carefully composed mask had cracked, but she wasn't the type to go down without a fight. I expected retaliation, I just didn't know how fast it would come. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab my mail and froze. A bright orange violation notice was nailed to my fence. Not taped, not placed in my mailbox, nailed. Violation, unsanitary property conditions. Fine, $250 per day until resolved. I clenched my fists, my pulse pounding in my ears. Unsanitary. They flooded my land with sewage, and now they were fining me for it. The sheer arrogance of it sent a fresh wave of rage through me. I yanked the notice down and looked up just in time to see Howard Wilkins and 2 other HOA board members standing at the edge of my property. Clipboards in hand, they were taking notes and whispering to each other like vultures circling a dying animal. I strode toward them. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Howard gave me a plastic smile. "Routine property inspection, Elon. Just making sure the neighborhood stays, up to standard. I let out a bitter laugh. Up to standard? You people turned my land into a toxic swamp, and now you're here acting like I'm the problem. One of the men shrugged. We all have to follow the rules. You mean the rules you make up as you go? I snapped. Howard had the nerve to look offended. There's no need for hostility, Elon. Just clean up the mess and this all goes away. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You mean the mess your illegal sewage dump created? Howard adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. Like I said, we all have to follow the rules. I watched as they walked away, smug and self-assured, as if they had already won. But they hadn't won. Because while they were busy playing dirty, I was busy gathering ammunition. By the time I was done, they wouldn't just regret targeting me, they'd regret ever underestimating me. I had spent 2 weeks playing defense, watching as Karen and her HOA cronies tried to bury me in fines, drown me in sewage, and push me off my own land. But if they thought I was just going to roll over and take it, they had badly underestimated me. Now, it was my turn to play offense. Armed with Stanley's plumbing report, the leaked HOA emails, and my security footage, I marched straight into the county environmental office. The woman behind the counter barely looked up. Filing a complaint? She asked in a bored tone. I set my folder down with a loud thud. No. I'm here to shut them down. That got her attention. I laid out everything, the illegal sewage pipe, the forged documents, the deliberate targeting of my property. By the time I was finished, she wasn't just listening, she was furious. This is blatant environmental fraud, she muttered, flipping through the photos. If half of this is true, that HOA is in deep trouble. It's all true, I said. And I want justice. The next morning, 2 white county inspection trucks pulled up outside my house. Karen was about to have the worst day of her life. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, as the inspectors approached the HOA office. I could already hear Karen screeching from inside. You can't just barge in here. Ma'am, step aside, one of the officers said. We have a warrant to investigate unauthorized sewage disposal and potential environmental violations. Neighbors began gathering, whispering as Karen turned an alarming shade of red. Then, right in front of everyone, the inspectors marched straight to the hidden pipe and started digging. They found it in minutes. The lead inspector turned to Karen, holding up a section of the illegal pipe like it was Exhibit A in her trial. Would you like to explain this? For the first time, Karen had no words. And as I stood there, watching her finally be held accountable, I had never felt more powerful in my life. I sat on my porch, sipping a cup of coffee, watching as the HOA's carefully crafted illusion of control crumbled before my eyes. Karen's voice, usually dripping with condescension, was now shrill with desperation as she argued with the county inspectors. They weren't buying a single word. One of them, a grizzled man with a clipboard and the patience of a brick wall, cut her off mid-sentence. Ma'am, we have photographic evidence, county records, and video footage. Your HOA installed an illegal sewage diversion system to save money, and you knowingly let it flood private property. He gestured toward my ruined garden, my trashed workshop, my yard still reeking of waste. This isn't a minor infraction. This is a crime. Karen's hands shook as she clutched her pearl necklace. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my attorney, Sarah. Elon, just got word from the district attorney's office. They're formally opening an investigation into the HOA. This could turn into criminal charges. I grinned, watching Karen's face go pale as the inspectors took water samples and started measuring the property line. Good, I said, loud enough for Karen to hear. It's about time. Neighbors started creeping out of their houses, whispering amongst themselves. Many had ignored me when this all started. Some had even mocked me, believing Karen's lies. But now. Now they were seeing the truth with their own eyes. Wait, they really did this? Mrs. Rodriguez muttered. They've been lying to us, another neighbor asked, staring at the exposed pipeline. I turned to the growing crowd, ready to drive the final nail into Karen's coffin. They didn't just lie, I said, letting my voice carry. They stole from us. They used our money to cut corners, and when I spoke up, they tried to destroy my home. How much more are you willing to take? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen was losing control, and for the first time, she knew it. And that was when I knew, I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. This was bigger than me. As the sun dipped below the rooftops of Maple Grove Estates, I stood at the edge of my property, watching the grand unveiling of justice. The scene playing out before me was better than anything I could have imagined. Karen Thompson, the queen of the HOA, standing in the middle of my ruined yard, ankle-deep in the very sewage she tried to pretend didn't exist. The county officials had arrived that afternoon, armed with legal documents, a cleanup crew, and most importantly, the press. Cameras flashed as reporters shoved microphones in Karen's face. Mrs. Thompson, do you deny the allegations that the HOA illegally diverted sewage onto private property to cut costs? Mrs. Thompson, are you aware that the county is considering criminal charges for environmental violations? Mrs. Thompson, what do you have to say to the homeowners who trusted you? Karen looked like a trapped animal, eyes darting between the reporters, the inspectors, and the neighbors who once followed her blindly. Her power, built on arrogance and intimidation, was collapsing in real time. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The lead inspector, a woman with a clipboard and a permanent no-nonsense expression, pulled out a cease and desist order and handed it directly to Karen. As of this moment, all HOA operations are suspended pending a full audit. Furthermore, we've discovered financial discrepancies. The county will be investigating where HOA funds have actually been going. I already knew the answer, straight into Karen's personal bank account. The crowd gasped. A murmur spread like wildfire. Karen's own people turned against her. Wait, what do you mean, financial discrepancies? She's been using our dues for herself. Neighbors who once whispered about me were now yelling at her. I caught Howard, the HOA treasurer, slowly inching toward his car, trying to escape before anyone noticed. Not so fast, I called out, holding up my phone. Would you like to hear the recording of Karen admitting everything? The look on her face was priceless. She had built this kingdom on lies. And now? She was sinking in her own filth. As I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, I watched the chaos unfold like the final act of a well-written play. Karen Thompson and her loyal lackeys were scrambling, trying to salvage the empire they built on lies, but it was too late. The county inspectors had issued an immediate shutdown of all HOA operations, and now, residents who once followed Karen blindly were beginning to turn on her. I could hear the shouting from 2 houses down. You told us our HOA dues were for community improvements. Where did all that money go, Karen? I had to pay a $2,000 fine for painting my mailbox the wrong shade of beige while you were pocketing HOA funds. How much of our money did you steal? Karen looked nothing like the confident dictator from past HOA meetings. Her shoulders hunched, her face red with stress, her once pristine pearl necklace now lopsided as she tried to hold back an onslaught of furious homeowners. And then, as if the universe had a sense of humor, the county's lead investigator stepped forward with the final nail in her coffin. After reviewing the HOA's financial records, he announced, "We have determined that over $600,000 in community funds were misappropriated. These funds were funneled into personal accounts, unauthorized expenses, and fraudulent beautification projects that only benefited select properties, namely, those of board members." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Then, all hell broke loose. Residents were yelling, demanding answers, some even calling for Karen's arrest right then and there. Howard, the treasurer, tried to slip away quietly, but 2 neighbors blocked his path. "Where do you think you're going?" one of them growled. I leaned back in my chair, completely at peace as I watched Karen's reign collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. This wasn't just justice, this was karma served on a silver platter. And the best part? The real fireworks were still to come. As the morning sun painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, I stepped outside onto my newly restored lawn, the very same ground that had once been a wasteland of sewage, fines, and injustice. But today, it was a symbol of something else: triumph. The Maple Grove HOA dictatorship had finally crumbled under the weight of its own corruption. Karen and Howard had been removed from the board in disgrace, their accounts frozen as the county built its criminal case. Their fancy cars, their fake smiles, their iron grip on the neighborhood, all of it, gone. The new HOA board, now under the leadership of people who actually cared, issued a formal apology to every resident who had suffered under their rule. And me? I wasn't just the guy they tried to push out. I was the one who pushed back. I stood in front of my brand new workshop, rebuilt with funds from the HOA's restitution payments. The garden that had been drowned in sewage was now thriving again, greener and more bountiful than ever. My once isolated house had become a symbol of resistance and victory. Neighbors who had once ignored me now waved as they walked past, offering friendly nods and fresh-baked pies. Even those who had sided with Karen were too ashamed to meet my eyes. But the best part? The community had changed. The residents, now free from Karen's reign, started speaking up, standing together. The fear of retaliation was gone. At the last meeting, a woman who had once been fined $500 for planting the wrong kind of flowers stood up and proposed a community garden. The vote? Unanimous approval. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. They had tried to drown me in sewage, bury me in fines, silence me with threats. But instead, they had created their own downfall. I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, untainted by corruption, sewage, or fear. I won, I muttered, smiling as I ran my hands over the leaves of my thriving tomato plants. And damn, did victory taste sweet. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. The fate of Maple Grove HOA's corrupt reign teetered on the edge, and I was there to watch it crash down in flames. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her once perfectly styled hair looking frazzled, her confident smirk long gone. Howard sat beside her, his bow tie slightly askew, tapping his fingers anxiously against the table. The walls that had once protected them, their lies, their intimidation, their web of corruption, had collapsed. And now, justice was coming. The judge peered over her glasses, her tone sharp. "Mrs. Thompson, the evidence against you is overwhelming. Falsifying environmental reports, illegally diverting sewage, misusing HOA funds for personal gain. Do you deny any of it?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The prosecutor didn't need to press further. They had my photos, my recordings, the financial statements, even the emails where she mocked homeowners who couldn't fight back. The HOA's own board members had turned against her, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Howard had already struck a deal, agreeing to testify in exchange for leniency. The judge sighed. "Mrs. Thompson, you will be fined $250,000 for your actions, placed on probation, and banned from serving on any HOA board in this county for life. Additionally, your company is responsible for repaying homeowners for damages caused by your illegal plumbing diversions." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of relief and satisfaction. But I wasn't done. I stood, clearing my throat. "Your Honor, I have one request." The judge raised a brow. "Go on." I pulled out a printed petition, signed by over 200 residents. "We'd like to formally rename the new community park after Karen Thompson." Karen's eyes lit up with surprise, until I added, "as a reminder of everything a neighborhood should never become." The room erupted in laughter and cheers. Karen slumped lower in her chair, her face burning red. Poetic justice. Delivered. The sun was shining on Maple Grove's new beginning. Neighbors gathered at the freshly built community green, a space that had once been wasted HOA office space and Karen Thompson's personal kingdom. Now, it belonged to everyone. Families set up picnic blankets, kids chased each other across the freshly planted grass, and a local band played cheerful music near the new community garden, a garden that I had helped design. Jennifer, the new HOA president, took the microphone, her voice steady. This community has been through a lot, but today proves what we can do when we stand together. She turned to me with a smile. Elon Reynolds, your fight for justice reminded us all that neighborhoods should be built on respect, not power trips. And to honor that, she gestured toward a large cloth covering the new sign. 2 residents pulled it down, revealing Reynolds Community Park, built on strength, grown in unity. Applause exploded around me. My throat tightened. For weeks, I had been knee-deep in battles, fighting corruption, proving my case, and defending my home. I never expected to become a symbol of the community's resilience. Neighbors shook my hand, some teary-eyed, some laughing. We should have stood up sooner, Michael Chun admitted, but you showed us how. Jennifer held out a ceremonial pair of scissors. Would you do the honors? As I cut the red ribbon, a wave of victory, relief, and hope washed over me. The fight was over, the corruption was gone, and the people had taken their neighborhood back. I looked out at the smiling faces around me. This wasn't just my win. It was ours.